coalition also gives us, as small communities, gives us that opportunity to have a bigger voice. It gives us the ability to really leverage the small amounts of funds that we do have to really do the research and really have a good understanding how our industry, how our government, how our municipalities can work together. And so the coalition was really put together and designed to help us do that. We've done some really good work, and we're not going to take an awful lot of your time tonight because there's a great venue of speakers, or a great list of speakers here tonight. But we would like to tell you a little bit about what it is that we've been doing and our plans for the next few years.
Absolutely. So our strategic plan there strongly and aggressively represent the best interests of our communities. And just to let you know, we'll go on to our priorities, but if there's anything that you want to discuss with either one of us, just tap us on the shoulder or send us an email. It's priorities. I'll read them. There we go. So first of all, building permanent resource communities. It's vital, it's important. You guys are investing in our communities, you're building businesses here, your homes, your children are going to school here, making friends here, they're playing soccer, and we want to make sure that we're building a permanent resource community so that when your children grow up and go away for their post-secondary education, and they're thinking about where to raise their children, they're going to think Fort St. John because they had such a fabulous childhood.
So our second priority is really to recognize and acknowledge the pivotal role that the First Nations play in our resource development moving forward. They are our neighbors. We want to work very closely together with them. Both communities have been interacting. Yesterday was, I think, the first ever regional district where the regional district had its meeting on one of our First Nations communities. We were out at the Soto. A very good interaction, a very good meeting. We've had meetings with the DOIG, and those were good meetings. And some of the other municipalities are starting to, and First Nations communities are starting to work together in bigger and better ways. We are neighbors. A lot of the issues, I guess, that we have as municipalities and as neighbors run across the board. There's a lot of commonality there, and as we work on these common issues together, we can build trust and we can move forward and deal with some of the more difficult issues that we know are going to be coming at us. So it's important. And if I could, I'd like to put a bit of a plug in here for an event that's coming to the region. The Walking with Our Sisters tour, the art event that has been touring the world for the last couple of years in honor of missing and murdered Indigenous women, is coming to our region. And our region is the last place that this art exhibition will be shown. It's in their tradition that when they have art like this that's representing passed on members of their municipalities, or pardon me, of their nations, that those vamps, which are the tops of moccasins that are beaded, are destroyed. They're burned. And so the last time that this display of 1,400 vamps will be in Taylor, and the local committee is really looking for volunteers and assistance to help them put this together. Right now the display is on in Calgary. It'll be on in Grand Prairie between now and June, and then in July it'll be in Taylor. So we're really looking forward to displaying that in our region, and it'll be really important, I think.
And we recognize the missing and murdered Indigenous women, and not just Indigenous women. There's a lot of cold cases out there, and so the City of Fort St. John has given a one-time shot of $85,000 to the RCMP to take all those cold case files and make them electronic into the computer system, so the computer can start churning through all of that and have another set of eyes take a look at those files. So this is really about taking ownership and following up on the issues in our community, and whether or not it's First Nations or non-First Nations, they need to be dealt with. So the third one is advancing Northeast BC interests to the provincial and federal government. I can assure you they know who we are. I'll just keep that short and brief. We'll touch on that on the next slide.
We make it part of what we do to monitor our Peace River Agreement, which all of you may remember was the fair share. It was a very tough agreement to negotiate originally back in, well, I guess, early 2000s. We've recently renegotiated it with all our partners in the piece. $50 million coming to our region every year. There's been some significant changes to it in the last iteration of it, and so we just really want to monitor that and ensure that the province is going to come forward with that money. We're the ones that see the industry, and we don't have that ability to tax them, and so this grant is in lieu of the taxation that otherwise they would supply to the communities.
That's right. And the last priority that we have is continued emphasis on being a research-based organization. Without the facts, you can do nothing. And so we have done a lot of work on a lot of different topics. And for example, moving forward, one of our priorities for 2018 is to actually look at the opportunity to look at the economic value of the rail bed between Prince George and Fort Nelson. And what would happen if we enhance that rail bed, put more sidings in, et cetera? How would we be able to take advantage of opportunities that are presently in front of us with different industries, or emerging opportunities that may be there as well? And so in my conversations with potential funding, they said, well, have you thought about doing that for all of British Columbia? Or sorry, Northern British Columbia. So they think that the Northeast BC Coalition might be the entity that would be able to do that. So that would be really interesting. We're going to have to rebrand ourselves and take the NE part of it out there and take a look at how we can move forward.
The other piece of research that we may be looking at is how the fracking review will impact our communities and the industries that we have in the north. And so depending what the scientific review comes up with, we'll need to evaluate how that impacts our resource communities. And so that's another piece of work that we intend to do.
Yep. So the next slide, we are proactive and engaged.
Okay, so there's, engaging with the provincial government and the federal government is a big part of what we do, lobbying and having an advocacy role. We really started with the PST leveling the playing field issue. We were so close to getting that on the legislative agenda, and then we had the election last year, and it sort of went to the back burner because the new government has an awful lot of legislation that they'd like to put through. But we're still working on it, and we're still moving forward. We went to Ottawa with a delegation of mayors that was really Kitimat driven, but we sort of all jumped onto that bandwagon and said, yes, it's important that resource communities get together, get out there, get to Ottawa, talk to as many agencies as we possibly could at the federal level to really let them know how important this industry and this particular project, LNG Canada, is to our communities across the entire industry and north.
Yeah, and so speaking of LNG, I just came back last night. I was over in Kitimat. Kitimat LNG has done a lot of work. I'm looking forward to hearing from Suzanne. Kitimat is eager to have LNG as part of their community moving forward. I went up the road up to the Kitimat LNG, where Chevron will have their LNG pending a positive FID from Chevron. They are a fabulous community, and it was wonderful to be out there and visit with them. So thank you very much for your time today. And as I said earlier, if there's any questions that you have of the coalition, or if you have ideas or something, please, by all means, Rob and I will be here, and we'd love to have a conversation with you. Have a great evening.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rob and Laurie. I would like to invite one of our gold sponsors up to introduce our next speaker. I would like to ask LaPrairie Group of Companies President and CEO Scott LaPrairie to join us. Thanks, Scott.
Hello, everyone. I don't do this very often. I just found out yesterday there was. So anyway, many of you will know our LaPrairie crane. We're the orange ones. And but you might not know what else we all do. We started the the business in just south of here in Tumbler Ridge in 1982 to help construct the Northeast coal mines at the time, and we're still there to this day. We relocated or expanded into Fort St. John in 1988 and to get after the oil and gas sector, and since then we've grown the crane business to about 70 machines located here, Tumbler Ridge, branches in Peace River, Fox Creek, Fort McMurray, Saskatoon. And so that we're pretty proud of our orange brand. Some of the other things that we do in the LaPrairie Group, we have a company called LaPrairie Works, and it's a highways maintenance contractor in Alberta. We look after about 6,000 kilometers of highway from Fox Creek to the Alberta border and up to the Northwest Territories. We have a company called LaPrairie Heavy Haul that is, one of those heavy haul contractors with the trailers with 100 wheels that go down the road. We can haul up to 120 tons legally into Alberta, BC, wherever we have to go. Another company we have is called LaPrairie Rock Products, where we have 3 or 4 pits and mobile crushing spreads where we will tailor our aggregate production to whatever the customer needs and wherever they require it. What other ones? LaPrairie Oilfield Services is logistics frac sand haulers. We have a fleet of about 35 tractor trailers that deliver to the last kilometer frac sand that makes this whole industry go around. And our fastest growing business is called Canadian Silica Industries, and we own 3 frac sand mines, one in Peace River, one in Wisconsin, and one in Michigan. We also have terminals at the end of the line, terminals at Dawson Creek here, and in Buffalo, New York, and Cleveland, Ohio. So the frac sand industry is it's what's making this all go around. It's gonna be what makes LNG successful. What else do I have? So we're in the 36th year of our business. We're 100% Canadian family owned, and we started right here in the Peace region. My son Andre, who's here, is the branch manager for our crane business, and we have offices and locations from Saskatchewan all the way to the Northwest Territories and Yukon. So we're pretty proud of our homegrown business. We just came through a milestone of our 500th full-time hire, and we have an excess of 500 different rolling pieces of equipment. One of the things before I get to introduce the next guest, I'm hopeful that a lot of the nonsense that we're having to deal with as far as regulatory approvals and social license and all these other things are, that somewhere along the way that reality will come home to roost. We need to educate the people in the large urban areas to understand that everything, all the stuff they have is either extracted or it's grown. And it's one of the two, and we need people to understand that how their phone was made, how their glasses were made, how their shoes were made, how everything is made, and they need to understand that. And we need to fight back. There's a lot of foreign influence happening in our democracies, whether it's Ties Foundation, whether it's Lead Now. There are all kinds of mostly, I call them economic terrorists. The Suzuki Foundation, I know everyone will think he's a great guy, but he's sponsored by Tides, and he's sponsored by Lead Now, and he's sponsored by the Rockefeller Fund, and he's sponsored by all these eco-terrorists who want to shut our resources into the ground, and we need to fight back. And that's what leads me to introducing our new Foo Fighters, the Resource Works. Resource Works for respectful, fact-based dialogue on responsible resource development in British Columbia. New federal legislation threatens to the future of Canadian oil and gas sector, with some of the nation's best paying jobs being sent to foreign countries that do not respect the environment like Canadian industry does. Numerous other challenges facing the traditional natural resource economy: energy, mining, forestry, aquaculture. Resource Works is building a movement of support for resource jobs. So please help me welcome Stuart Buer and John Turner. Thank you.
Thank you for that nice introduction. Appreciate that. I'd like to introduce John Turner, our board chair, who is known to many of you in the room because of his long history in the piece. I'd also like to point out another ResourceWorks person right here, Ben Lawton. Could you stand up? Because people need to know who you are. I've asked Ben to be here to help me network with everybody, get everybody's business card. A lot of pressure on you tonight, Ben. I'd like to recognize the Chamber of Commerce for making this possible. Lilia, we had a conversation in Prince George back in January, and I don't know where you are, but there you are. But thanks for the culmination of it this evening, and all the work Moira Green does. I've known her a long time. And Mayor Ackerman, you've been on our advisory council at ResourceWorks since day one, which was March 2014. You were one of my very first phone calls, and to my delight, you said, yes, I will. I don't know who you are or what this thing is, but yeah, okay. And here we are. You've been to so many of our meetings. You've generated so much support and awareness for our cause. It is such a testament to your commitment to your community here. And also, I would say the same of Rob Fraser, Mayor. Thank you for all of your support. I've probably burned through half my time with that, so I better get away from the politesse into the meat of this because it's so important. You know, I'm traveling a lot right now. I'm talking to as many people as I can because I think that time's running out. You know, there's a lot of people who don't want the industries that most or all of you depend on to exist at all. You're the enemy. They want you dead. They really do. That's not an overstatement. And they're actually, a few years ago, it might be said that you represented the establishment in Canada, the traditional energy sector. Well, now you're on the outside, and those who want to overturn things are actually inside the establishment. They're ransacking, they're turning over all of the conventions. I'm going to give you some details of that. If that sounds like an extreme or strong statement, I can, I'll, as quickly as I can, I'll document it here. But I've got a few other things I want to say next. So Ben, if you would just flip over. I mean, I couldn't think of a more appropriate name, Crazy Times in BC, to what I'm going to describe, and also the things that we need to do for them to be slightly less crazy, but hopefully fun. So where we are here, I want to talk about the misinformation that we see out there, just in a general sense, the tyranny that I feel our British Columbia political system is suffering because of just one three-person party. Secondly, the government position on pipelines we need to talk about because it's such a big public issue, not here, because you all understand how this works, and you live the safety. You had a safety briefing before this started. They don't do that in Vancouver. They wouldn't know where the exits are. They wouldn't have a... The third one, what carbon pricing means for Northeast BC. And I've got I'm preparing a speech for Whitehorse next week where I'm speaking to the Chamber of Mines about this, and I'm digesting a lot. I'm not going to give you the full whack. Lilia would kill me for one thing, drag me off the stage. But I'd like to start with the misinformation piece because we just see, yesterday, having spoken with Sean Surerus a few days ago and learned about the company firsthand, I found myself on radio, CKNW, major radio station in Vancouver, listening to someone. I was brought in for a debate by someone who opposes the Kinder Morgan pipeline. I was the guy they called to give a different view, a supportive view, and I heard her say that there's no jobs that come from the pipeline. There's no short-term jobs really that are worthwhile. Kinder Morgan's lying because of big oil lies, right, about all the jobs. So there aren't any. They're just going to build that pipeline. I don't know how. And afterwards, there won't be any jobs either. And I just had a phone call with Sean a few days ago that I'd been thinking about a lot, and I'm still thinking about. He was telling me about I might have the number wrong, but the 1,400 people in the workforce that are going to be part of the spread that you're building, fingers crossed, for Kinder Morgan, the high complement of First Nations who are part of that, who are using the skills that they're acquiring to do that. The investments, no doubt, I expect in capital that you're making, you're risking as a business person to be able to succeed in that. I've been thinking about that a lot, Sean. And now I didn't get into that whole thing with the woman from the Living Ocean Society who was telling me there were no jobs, but I told the listener that, look, there are small companies, and I know these people, I'm hearing their stories. Believe me, these are real jobs, real families, real people, real communities, done right. You know, the standards that you build are equivalent to what's needed for a nuclear facility now. That's how high the welding standards are. And people don't know that. So I was happy to be able to say to Vancouver listeners or anyone listening to CKNW at that time that it's just not so. There are real jobs there, and I knew there were before, but Sean really gave me. I'd like to talk about the global attack. My introducer talked about, he mentioned the Rockefeller Fund. I can tell Vivian Krause has been here before me because she's really been briefing you on this stuff. And I've known her a long time, and she strikes some people as a strong tonic, but her facts are impeccable. She's right on what she says. There is a global attack. I know it's a Saturday night, so the worst thing I could do is go through a lot of policy. I want to show you some pictures. Friday. Gee, it feels like Saturday. Feels like it should be. Just back up one. This Rockefeller Brothers Fund, for those who didn't hear Vivian or haven't done that research themselves, a charitable foundation financed by the oil barons, ironically. Now they're fighting against oil. They funded this one group, New Venture, to support the campaign to cap tar sands production. Now, New Venture is a fund. They fund Tides Canada, which funds Greenpeace to do guerrilla things and Dogwood Initiative. The lady I referenced, her Living Ocean Society, she was asked by the host, here's how things are changing right now, and why I think there's hope. She was asked, where do you get your funds from? I've never heard a journalist ask one of those activists that question before. I was floored. I thought she was going to ask me next, and I would have said, hey, some companies and people and communities fund resource work so we can do this work. She didn't need to ask me because we talk about that. We're transparent about it. But she wanted to ask this lady, and she said, well, we get our money from the New Venture Fund. And the interviewer, Joe Bennett, she said, well, what's that? Oh, it's just a group of philanthropists from the U.S. who like to support the environment. Okay. Well, Vivian could have been the other person in the room to maybe go further into it. But this group, if you've heard the name Zipporah Berman, she got herself into a lot of the glue recently in Alberta for her position on accepting a role on a job to support the oil sands, but then really working against it. Anyways, all kind of tied together. Next slide, please. And this is where I want to show you something on a Friday night. So Tides USA, they are one of these big funding organizations. They let the money flow so that when people in downtown Vancouver are told that the whales are going to be killed or the tanker's going to blow up or all that stuff, they're the ones out there, boots on the ground, knocking on people's doors, sending all this, I would call it misinformation out. Their head office is down in San Francisco. What are those red dots? What are those doing in my map? Those are huge oil tankers calling in. Tides USA is up by the Presidio, by the bridge, but only a few miles away, I've seen 8 tankers there. This is actually from this morning from the Marine Tracker app that I subscribe to. I love to watch this stuff because it shows you some interesting things. Next slide, please. This is the city of Amsterdam. Anyone been there? Now, Shell, of course you've been there, Susanna, because that's this fine company, Shell. But Amsterdam, a city of waterways and canals and a port. There's Greenpeace International, which is doing a lot of work. They're the ones who are building those little houses down on the Kinder Morgan line, down, I think, towards the southern end. And they're putting in, stunt actors to get their message out. It's all headquartered from here. Now, those red dots are also oil tankers. That's also this morning. So basically, right at this moment, there's probably about 90 or 100 of those tankers. If you zoom in, there's actually more than you can see in this particular slide. So that's 2 kilometers on your bicycle from the Greenpeace headquarters. You go down and see those. So you think those, judging by the rhetoric in BC, those are pretty dangerous, catastrophic things, but they are okay with them over there. Next slide, please. Now, where are all the oil tankers we're worried about in Vancouver? There they are. Next slide. The Strait of Georgia, the Salish Sea, we're worried about that, aren't we? We don't want oil tankers there. That would be catastrophic. Let's see what we've got here. Well, all of those red dots are south of the 49th or the non-49th part of the U.S.-Canada border. They're all in U.S. waters. They're visiting the 5 refineries around the Salish Sea. They're doing so, it would seem, quite safely. And let's have a look at the next slide. That's, as of this morning, the global tanker fleet tracked on their AIS systems up to satellite. That's where they all are. You know, this is done ubiquitously around the world, safely every day. You never hear about it, almost never. When you do hear about it, you think, that's a big thing, because it never happens, practically never. It's done so safely. So that's just a bit of context. And we've been sharing this recently, and I know that in the BC Liberal Caucus, a lot of the MLAs have been tweeting and talking about this. They've raised it in the House. It's a visual aid to understanding of a type that I think is quite effective. And if you see our tweets in ResourceWorks or our Facebook, you know, we're sharing this kind of thing because I think it resonates with a lot of people. The polling that we see tells us that the number one concern on oil pipelines right now, the latest Ipsos poll that came out a couple of days ago, you know, people are more supportive. There's like 55% of people, even in Vancouver, who are supportive of the pipeline. This is good news. Our work is starting to take hold. But they still have this big concern about tanker safety. And so this is one little piece of evidence that I think a lot of people, when they see it, they're challenged, and they have to say, well, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. So this is one thing we can be doing. I'd like to move on from that into, you know, back to Andrew Weaver, my MLA. I live in Victoria, and unfortunately, or he's my MLA, unfortunately, because, you know, he's your enemy number one. The uncertainty that he's introduced into the political system right now. Let's have a look at the next slide. I just have a couple of quotes here. I mean, he's all over the place on this stuff. I know he visited here during the election and educated you on his worldview. He says here, if governments double down on 20th century carbon-based economics, that's you guys, it's your communities that feel the impacts and pay the prices. Well, I think it's the other way around, but let's look at the next quote. When pipelines and LNG plants crowd out our conversation about BC's and Canada's economy, we miss what's actually happening. The exciting, innovative, emerging economy that is reshaping our communities. What the hell is he talking about? Does anyone know? He doesn't know. I've asked him. He has no idea what he's talking about. There's nothing behind the rhetoric. Last time when he came up here to tell you about this, not knowing what the heck he was talking about, I think someone, Matt, did you ask him, what do you mean? I think he said, oh, we're going to get you a BMW plant like Seattle's got, or like Seattle wants. Well, that would be nice, but come on. But I think that's really what's in his head. There's no depth there, and yet this 3-person Green Party caucus is really holding your future hostage right now. And the more we can call them out and have information about this, I mean, this is existential for you folks. It's so important. I just want to, I have hope that the BC NDP government, for its tenure in office, however long that may be, in its somewhat fragile situation, finds a way to do the best it can. It's the Workers' Party. It has, I think, a duty to people in its position. Nevertheless, I think it's important to understand some of the conflicts they have, and I see a lot of hypocrisy on the position on pipelines. Next slide, please, Ben. Now, over the last few years, through the Rockefeller Fund and Tides and all these people, the average British Columbian has come to have a certain viewpoint on Alberta oil, especially the kind that's going to move down the pipe, the new pipe. Dilbit, bitumen, it's become sort of demarketed, or as Vivian Krause likes to put it, demarketed as this kind of sinister substance. And I've been looking into it. Now, you're experts here. You're probably thinking, well, this guy should know. I know that it's the same as any other crude oil for all intents and purposes. Functionally speaking, if you spill it into the ocean, that we have scientific study after scientific study saying it's actually easier to retrieve. The fears that have been planted, I think, are somewhat, I guess I would say, linguistic in nature, because dilbit, doesn't it sound sort of sinister? Dilbit, bitumen. Or as I would like to tell Prime Minister Trudeau, it's not bitumen, it's bitchy people. But the next slide, please. Now, this is some Alaska crude oil. It's from one particular field. Have a look at it and then flip back. Well, you just go back one more and then back again. Okay. Who sees the difference? Yeah, well, okay, one of them is bitumen, And the other one is Alaskan crude oil. 900,000 barrels of that moves down past the beaches of Tofino every single frickin' day in tankers from Valdez to points south, including the Salish Sea and Long Beach. And no one has anything to say about it. And actually, it was raised in that radio debate I had yesterday by the host. And the response was, well, that's not one of our issues right now. We don't have anyone paying us to protest. Okay, all right. That's really what it comes down to. People who have technical knowledge. All of you know, like, a million times more than I do about the petroleum business and molecules. I'm not a scientist. I'm a former journalist, writer. I'm learning as I go. You people know this stuff. You really are the ones who need to use your knowledge and authority and education and share it and find ways to do it. I think you should get busy with that, as well as all the other things you're busy with. Moving on from there. I just want to get into carbon policy a little bit, and before you nod off, I'll keep it short. Lilia, are you watching the clock? How am I doing here? 2 minutes, holy cow. Okay. I can't really do carbon policy except to say there's probably like 5 things that you got to be worried about. I mean, ask Susanna. She knows in detail, chapter verse, all what they are. But not just carbon policy. The environmental assessment we're going through, the BC one. It's not transparent. We have a concern that somehow the current policy isn't working well, it lacks public confidence. This is what's happening through government in Ottawa, in Victoria, I would say in some of the larger municipal bodies as well. They're just coming into office and saying, oh, this is all broken, we got to fix it. That's why you're having the fracking review. What's broken with fracking? Probably many of you would say, well, there's nothing broken with fracking. We've been very well regulated, even too regulated. What's wrong with that? We see that groups are like the West Coast Environmental Law have been very effective in bringing forward what had been a sort of marginal viewpoint on things into the center of government, and their people and their policies are now what's driving it because of people like Weaver in this fragile situation. Spills response, you may not even know there's a spills response process going on that may well affect your businesses. You know about the fracking review, but there's also on the climate policy front, there's a lot going on there. I think there's concerns right now on how species at risk, and of course we're all concerned about species at risk, every one of us, but the way that some of the policy is being developed, we see that across Canada with the carbon pricing, if we're going to see a potential change of government in Alberta and Ontario in the next 12 months, that results in more provinces that are defying Ottawa's national carbon problem framework, we're going to have a problem. And it has uncertainty in that. We have got impact assessments, the Fisheries Act, the Navigation Protection Act federally, Canadian Energy Regulator. We have the backstop carbon tax, which is causing a lot of businesses to try to figure out what it means for them. We've got new analysis from the Parliamentary Budget Office that seems to suggest that carbon pricing just means another layer of financial burden on top of everything else that you deal with in your businesses. Carbon reporting, this one's scary. Actually, this one's real for you. The fact that GHG reporting requirements now apply to all facilities with emissions more than 10,000 tons of GHGs, and that's down from 50,000. That means that a whole whack of infrastructure is going to be affected. I was talking with someone in Calgary a couple of mornings ago, and the grim expression of a major Canadian energy company at the prospect of some of what's happening that is actually a Peace River issue. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but you should be very concerned, and your businesses are at risk. There's a whole bunch more, and my 2 minutes is more than up, I'm sure, but I'm not finished yet. I'd like to talk about Bill C-48. You may know Calvin Helene and the work he's doing, the corridor. If we lose the northern access, the market access from the north through this bill, let's hope that thing dies on the order paper. Maybe it will. Maybe it will just be stalled until the next election. We'll see. But keep up the pressure through Bob Zimmer, through all of your contacts, the delegations that you've got of your municipal leaders to Ottawa, because they need to hear what is being said here on that. It is so scary. I was in Ottawa last week talking to some senators and others. It is quite something. Bill C-69, I would repeat, just ditto that to Bill C-69. And and you know, the great irony here, of course, is that as we slowly, through all of these things, strangle the oil and gas sector, you know, there's never been a press release from Ottawa saying, today we're going to strangle the oil and gas sector, but it's the additive effect of all those things. Meanwhile, we're able to import from the US, from Saudi Arabia, from Angola, wonderful places like that, all the hydrocarbons they want to sell us, no questions asked. What's your gender policy? What's your carbon policy? We're not, our government is not asking them. They're only asking that of this country. I've got the 1 minute mark. I'm going to whip through the last bit, which is really important, which is, okay, what are we going to do about this, Ben? We're going to speak truth to power on this because we're the underdogs. Next. So here's what ResourceWorks is doing. Top left, I was in Ottawa last week. I'm holding a report. I'll tell you more about it, not now, I guess. Well, I brought it to senators. I left it with them, our citizens, kind of like that picture. There's a no left sign there. I don't know how that got in the picture, but anyway. There's a few things we're doing. We're going to go to the next slide. Here's one thing I do. I like to talk to CBC. Now, I know CBC in the north is just an open and understands the resource economy. I love being on CBC in the north, but CBC in Vancouver is a different kettle of fish. And they don't invite people with my viewpoint on there very often, but they do invite me because we're all research-based. We've got the facts. That's what it's about. And we're doing it in this respectful way that is very suited to the urban environment. And we do in social media. That's a stat, the safety. That's how much of the oil that's moved down the Kinder Morgan in its history has gotten to where it's supposed to go, which is a pretty good stat. Next. We do that in social media. That's just one example of things we do every day in ResourceWorks social media. Here's a report, 100-page report. We spent 2 months. I had some volunteers. I got volunteers. No one's getting paid. Some people are getting paid. But we don't have enough to pay people. Ben is volunteering to be here. We have another one. This is coming out soon, the economic impacts of pipeline expansion. You know, right now what's happening, there are groups that are publishing these reports, economic impacts of the pipeline. You read it, it'll say there's only 40 jobs now, and there's no market for oil in China. Big oil's lying, of course, because that's what they do. And that's the kind of thing you get. Well, we're getting the actual verified facts out there in our studies. And a couple more things before the hook comes out. I have to go to Ottawa and talk to people like this. That costs money. We did a rally, and we totally defied expectations. A lot of people said, Stu, don't do that rally. There'll be 4 people show up in downtown Vancouver at Jack Pool Plaza in front of the Olympic Flame. Don't do it. You'll be embarrassed. Well, we had between 200 and 500 people come out. It ebbed and flowed. This lady, she had a sign. That's Margareta. She's one of our interns who's working on a report right now that's going to, I think, shake things up. That's some the UBC students who came out who believe that what you're doing is important work. Next slide. That's me. Next slide. You've seen enough of me, but I like the sign. Now, who's that man? Anyone know this guy? Dan Davies, can you tell me who it is? Ellis Ross, MLA from Skeena. Amazing work. Amazing work. I met with him yesterday. We had a great conversation about the importance of this. Next. And there's another picture. And this, John Turner, you live in Vancouver, on Vancouver Island. You shared this with me this morning. Our movement is spreading. This gentleman is in the local papers with his sign this morning in the town of Parksville on Vancouver Island, where everyone, don't they hate pipelines? No, not this man. Look at him. Look at it. I support healthcare, education, and Kinder Morgan. He's for real. He's out there. Let's give him a hand. Okay? We're seeing more of these. There's one Monday, May 7th, Monday, 12:30, steps of the legislature. There's one in Kamloops. It's taking off. We started it. All the work we've done. We're seeing positive momentum in the polls. Things are looking both terrible and good. All this stuff in my folder here. This is what you should be staying up nights over, because it is bad. But we're seeing some progress here, and we have to find a way to keep that going. The way that we're doing it at ResourceWorks, I'm going to argue to you, needs to be supported. We need certain key ingredient for that. It's called money. And one thing we want to do is collect some of it, hopefully from here, that we can use to do more of the same things I've showed you. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Stuart. We've heard Stuart before, and you're always entertaining. I know you have a whole lot more to say, too. So I'd like to invite one of our gold sponsors to the podium, ATCO Two Rivers Camp Services, to give a small presentation and introduce our next speaker.
Good evening. I really want to thank BC Chamber of Commerce for inviting us here tonight. We're at Two Rivers Camp Services, friendly new neighbor, and thank you for inviting us to your community. My name is Chris Scrimger. I'm one of the maintenance managers at the ATCO Two Rivers Camp Services on the Site C Worker Accommodation Lodge. Site C Worker Accommodation is built to accommodate 1,740 workers with capacity for expansion of up to 500 rooms. The 650,000 square foot facility was constructed in 2016 and features a water treatment plant, sewage treatment system, client office complex, a network of roads, spa, convenience store, coffee shop, gymnasium with indoor and outdoor courts, a lounge, a medical clinic, soccer field, gaming area, movie theater, and single occupancy executive bedrooms with ensuite bathrooms. The ATCO Two Rivers Lodge quality team ensures that the provision of high quality 24-hour operational management and service delivery to the lodge is guaranteed, including food service, catering, housekeeping, janitorial, laundry service, recreation, guest experience programs, maintenance, security, and emergency response measures. ATCO Two Rivers has independently attained core certification and ISO certification 9001, 2015 certifications within our first year of operation. ATCO Two Rivers Camp Services provides end-to-end catering support and guest management, starting with digitized guest check-ins, through to full meal services, recreation, and entertainment. We manage all corners of the lodge, ensuring every detail is covered. We aim to provide our guests with a home away from home experience, inclusive of a realm of healthy lifestyle choices. We recognize that true customer satisfaction and corporate success is based on our ability to provide exemplary products and services in a timely manner. We offer customized solutions to a wide range of demands required by our customers. And really, we're here tonight to introduce ourselves to you. Please feel free to come say hello. ATCO Two Rivers is dedicated to providing our employees with a safe working environment in all aspects of our business. We have developed and implemented a safety culture that has been adopted by our valued employees, both at work and home. We recognize that protecting the health and safety of our employees, subcontractors, and the public is fundamental to our success. We expect excellence in health and safety performance to be achieved through careful planning, support, and active participation. Through this expectation, an injury and incident-free workplace is an attainable goal we aim to achieve. Protecting the environment is an integral part of our business and our future. It is always our goal to continually improve our operation by setting, reviewing, updating, and measuring our environmental performance. Our Two Rivers Worker Accommodation features a state-of-the-art electrical power monitoring system capable of real-time feedback and historic reporting, allowing us to trend our performance and implement efficiencies where possible. ATCO Two Rivers strongly promotes recycling programs to our guests and employees also through digital and printed media. ATCO Two Rivers is dedicated to providing all our customers with above industry quality and positive overall experience, be it through coffee service for 25 people in an office setting or 2,000 plus guest lodge accommodations. Our management team works tirelessly to provide our customers with solutions to their individual needs and budgets. ATCO Two Rivers, we're always there, anywhere. I really want to thank you for the brief moments I've spoken here tonight. And at this point, I would like to introduce this evening's third keynote speaker, Mr. Jeremy Barton with Louisiana Pacific Peace Valley.
Again, just like to echo everyone else, say thank you for the chance to come and speak to the chamber here tonight. It's not something we spend a lot of time doing, but it's an opportunity we'd like to get out and do a little bit more. For those of you who aren't aware, we're the great big mill that's directly across from the airport, and I can tell you we have the second best seating arrangement during the annual air show if you're sitting on the roof, and those are welcome to attend. A little bit of history about Peace Valley as we go through. So we are a 24/7 operating manufacturing facility. We produce oriented strand board, primarily operating in a commodity panel, so looking at nailing on the walls and the roofs of homes. 80% of what we make goes to the U.S. market. We are heavily predominant on the U.S. building homes, just based on housing start comparisons to Canada. We have, right now, we're running about 677 million feet. If you were to take an equivalent of what that mill can produce, an average home uses about 2.5 bundles of OSB, and we'll produce about 380 homes in a 24-hour period, or roughly about 50,000 panels of OSB will come out in a 24-hour period. So we're designed to make board fast, a lot of moving parts. When we look at the safety, I think everyone has that common foundation that safety is the most important thing we do. We have a lot of ways that we can hurt people. If you look at our history, we've had stretches where we've done very, very well. And then we've had stretches where we've had an impact on people and on their families and sending them home. And the biggest thing that we can do is give people that opportunity to go home, spend time with their family, because work is something we do to spend time and have a life outside of it. If you look at our claims, of those 50,000 panels that we make in a 24-hour period, someone has to look at them before they head out the door. So it's a very eyes-on process. We have measurement steps throughout as we go, but it requires somebody to actually monitor it, to look at it and give it their stamp of approval before it goes. A lot of people make OSB, and it's very easy to find another manufacturer. And if you look at our historical claims rate, under $5,000 a year, roughly is where we average. So our employees do a fantastic job in delivering a quality product. Employee-wise, we have 165 hourly, 37 salary. We have about 25 to 30 contractors that work with us full-time, whether a First Nations group that contracts at our log yard, mechanical, or local vendors that are helping supply and maintain the facility. Like a lot of individuals, turnover and keeping people has been a challenge over the years. We don't mind oil and gas, but you guys seem to take the best ones away from us. But you look, we average probably about that 19 to 20% turnover, which is seeing a lot of younger people come into the workforce. And you have to have good systems, good processes in place to give them that chance to go home at the end of the day. Average years of service is about 5 years for our people, and that's in some of our key roles. And 30% of our workforce is under the age of 30. So again, developing and growing, how do you take that knowledge of the people that have been with us a long term and pass that down to a younger generation? You can move. So as we focus, you'll see historically since startup, we started around half capacity of the mill. Our 5-year plan is to get to rated capacity of 820 million feet, which is an increase of about another 140 million feet on top of what we're producing this year. Housing starts, again, primarily driven by the U.S. market, about a 1.2 million target for this year. And again, with the mill's capability, we can satisfy about 320,000 homes a year. So we rely heavily on the U.S. constructing and building. Fiber, so we were very reliant on a lot of logging that is done, primarily north of the river, about a 5-hour average turnaround time. In 2017, we used 900,000 tons of aspen and cottonwood combined. This year, we're planning about 975,000 tons, and it takes about 1.5 tons of fiber coming across to actually make 1,000 square feet or 31 panels of OSB. So on average, if you looked at it, 78 logging trucks a day are going into the consumption and production of product, and then the remainder we're building an inventory to get through winter breakup. So we'll end our breakup about the end of March. We'll carry about 303,000 meters cubed of wood, and that'll get us roughly to the middle of July before we start delivering again. So very reliant on the loggers and the effort that they bring in delivering that volume. Products that we make, again, primarily we're a commodity mill, but we are slowly transitioning and adding value-add products. We just started a commissioning line for our tech shield, applying a foil to an OSB panel, selling it to California, Arizona, cutting energy costs by about 30%. And that was an additional 17 people that we brought on board. And that'll be about 25% of the total volume that we're going to make. And we make a flooring product and then also a web stock product that's used in the construction of I-joist in our Red Bluff, California facility. So a little bit of background about our site. Again, we appreciate the support the community has given for us. We want to be good citizens, good corporate stewards, and we can't do it without the support that's been offered. So thank you. And I'd like to ask Mr. Dan Davies to come to the stage.
caught me off guard. Thank you, everybody. I'd like to first of all thank the Chamber, the Northeast BC Municipalities Coalition, as well as the Northeast Airport for putting on such an incredible event, something that is so important to us here in the Northeast. And we keep hearing up here in the Northeast, but truly it is important to our province, and it is truly, truly important to our entire country. First of all, I'd like to bring greetings on behalf of the official opposition of the legislature and our leader, Andrew Wilkinson. And the last time I did a quick introduction, I actually said Andrew Weaver. So I got to watch with the two Andrews that I make sure that I get him right, especially when he's sitting in the room. So it's not a good time to do that. Just before I introduce our next speaker, a couple things that we've kind of been hearing tonight, and certainly Stuart had mentioned it, about how we really are making ground. And if you look across the province, if you look across Canada, the opinion polls that are happening, people in this province are starting to see the picture. People are getting it. And as was mentioned, the biggest piece is the other side has 10 years on us. They have 10 years of people sitting around their coffee tables, their kitchen tables with the laptops, doing social media campaigns, while the rest of us in this room have been working. And it has really put us behind the 8 ball, but we are now starting to really make some great gains. And what we need to do, and everybody in this room plays a certain level of responsibility to talk to people in Vancouver. We all know people in Vancouver. We have family in Vancouver. We need to make sure that we are continuing to talk, continuing to encourage people to attend the rally in Victoria, rallies in Vancouver. We had a rally here in Fort St. John, an incredible rally in Fort Nelson. Almost 200 vehicles turned out to the rally. And this is a community that's, for lack of better words, dying right now. And they're pulling everything together to make sure that people are coming out. So again, big thanks to Stuart and Resource Works, CAP, ICBA, that are all out there driving this, but we need to support them as well. With that being said, I would like to introduce our next gold sponsor. Presenter is Top Notch Oilfield, and please welcome Judy Desjardins.
Good evening, everyone. Good to see Dan doing better. And remember what I said, Lori. Okay. As you, most of you that don't know me, I'm of Abenazad descent here in Northeast BC. My grandmother is one of the respectable elders here in Fort St. John. She's done a lot of opening prayers for Mayor Lori Ackerman, and done a lot of, she takes part in the Canada Day celebrations, and it's a great honor to be here and to be part of this rally, as well as many others that's been held in Fort St. John and along Northeast BC. It's all a great big need up here, as resource is our bread and butter. And we, this is something, our livelihoods, not only, there's many First Nations in Northeast BC that dwell on oil and gas, because this is how they make income for themselves, and the government funding and all that stuff is just little to none. So there's many First Nation contractors out there like myself. Those of you that don't know me, I'm Judy Desjardins. I'm one of the owners of Top Notch Oilfield Contracting. We're First Nation oilfield service company here with the great diversity in supply. When we first started out, with really not much to offer but manpower and a $1,500 credit card. Can you imagine? We were in the seismic business. We just jumped right in. With the help of family, who at the time was in that part of the business, and they helped us just to get us going, tell us what to do, how to do it, and what to expect when you're dealing with many seismic crews and laborers. That was a great big eye-opener for a couple Indian kids. So it was a challenge, but we did it. On my husband, who's supposed to be here and actually doing this party, ended up hurting himself sledding. And he's doing stuff he wasn't supposed to be up there. I didn't come from a business background. However, I did end up educating myself once we dove in first head, or dove in. And then my husband came from a trucking company. His family owned a great big trucking company out of Red Earth Creek. They had hot oilers, pressure trucks, steamers, all the specialized units. I didn't have any clue about business at that time. It wasn't until later I decided to go to college, do business courses, a couple of them. Accounting was one of them. I had joys of being taught by Julie, she's with MNP. So she was teaching at the time, so I was one of her students. After this was complete, we decided to manage and count the beans ourselves, as you all know, where all the holes, so we knew where all the holes were, and we were able to close them up and get into other things, invest into trucking, and right now we still do a lot of supply a lot of manpower, do trucking. There's a great big 10 pages here, and I said that I wasn't gonna take up like the stage like my grandmother. So I'm sure you all had a chance to read it all. So today we were first hired by Progress Energy, and they're a great company to work for. When we first started our business, we actually worked for a few companies, construction companies out of Fort St. John here. And Progress Energy actually worked with us. They taught us what safety was all about. They taught us how to get to standards with the oil companies, like safety, regulations, and there was no more doing things your own way. You had to follow safety and procedure. Protocol, and then later on we decided it was with Progress that we grew our business. We reinvested. They kept us busy. Today we still keep it pretty busy with Progress. We do road maintenance construction for them, and they're a really good company to work for. They I know a lot of companies out there, they say, they give First Nations first hand at getting in the door. Yes, you open the door for First Nations, but it's after the regulation part. Like, you go through all the paperwork, you do all that to get qualified. Well, that's as far as most people get in my as a First Nations. Myself, I banged on a bunch of doors, and just to get to the next step is really hard work. It's not like, okay, you did your paperwork, now this is where you have to go. Progress, actually, okay, here's the signed agreement, let's get to work. So we had a lot of learning to do with them, and they gave us a lot of opportunity as years grew, so that's how we grew our business. Right now, we still offer manpower, equipment, and trucking, and we operated out of Ping Mountain. We bought a piece of land up there for 11 acres, and we are pretty much next door to 62 trillion cubic feet of natural gas reserve. And we are pretty much right in the heart of activity. So with all the projects looming over our heads, we're hoping, like everyone else, that we get to stop doing that. She's like, cut. Okay, Lilia. So with all the projects looming, we're hoping, like everyone else, that we get the green light to go, to get to work. And yes, we're happy that finally we do have somebody on our end of the fence fighting for us, and all these rallies do mean something. I'm part of Fort St. John LNG rally with Alan Wu, so I've been a part of them, their rallies quite a few times. So thank you everyone for having me and for inviting me, Lilia, and I'd like to introduce our fourth keynote speaker, Kanyuma Coal Resources.
Thank you, everybody, and I appreciate being here tonight. My name's Ken Hodak with Kanuma Coal. Stuart, I didn't get a chance to meet you yet, but I'd like to do that. You mentioned about Kinder Morgan. I had the privilege of working with Kinder Morgan for a couple of years before I came up here. And I actually had a better privilege to sit down with Richard Kinder and talk to him over several different things. So I'm going to have to let him know that those 20,000 plus employees that work there and make a darn good living really don't count, you know. So as what some of the people in the pipeline business, but been in the coal business more than 40 plus years. Watched a lot of communities over those decades of where they were pretty vibrant and healthy and robust due to the mining businesses that were located in and around those communities. And over the course of time, you know, with the environmental movement down in the States in particular, you watched it grow like a cancer and then ultimately see those whole communities become ghost towns. And the kids grow up and go elsewhere, and all that's left are old people, and then the town keeps dying. And so it's a very real issue, you know, with the environmental movement, and you're absolutely right. It is an economic tyranny is what's going on. So it's something that affects everybody in the natural resource business, whether it's logging or whether it's timber or whether it's natural gas or all those and the above, mining especially. I'd like to introduce you to Kanuma Coal. We have right now started up in 2016, and we have 2 mines operating right now, and we have a 3rd mine that will be starting up this summer. Our first mine was located in, it's called the Brule Mine. We started that mine up in September of 2016. All of our assets are located just a little bit south and west of Chetwynd and a little bit north of Tumbler. These operations were pre-existing operations from Western, and then Walter Energy, and when Walter Energy filed bankruptcy, they idled all the assets, as did some of the sister mines there from Anglo and Teck. And you know, when we got there in September of 16, Tumbler Ridge was a pretty sad town. You know, there's a lot of homes for sale, a lot of homes foreclosed, a lot of people that were living there were working elsewhere, and the community was dying. And you know, one of the reasons we bought the company out of bankruptcy was the goal was to start those mines back up. We felt like after we looked at the assets that was there, the coal deposits that was there, we thought that they had some real economic opportunity there for everybody. And that's been our goal. It's not just for a few individuals. Kanuma Coal is a Canadian-based organization, and you know, both myself and the president live here in Tumbler, and you know, we plan on staying there as long as everybody will have us. So you know, our assets, Kanuma is a metallurgical coal mine. All of our coal goes into the steel making processes. We have 2 different types of coal for steel. One's for the coking coal, and the other one is for they call it PCI, which is a pulverized coal injection, which is used to, they pulverize the coal and inject it into the blast furnaces to help for heat, as well as for some of the carbon that's in that coal. But the coal here is very high quality. It's a very rare quality. It has some very strong attributes in the metallurgical business, but it has some real challenges on the geological side where we're next to the foothills of the Rocky Mountains, and a lot of folding and faulting that's going on throughout that area. So the coal seams don't lay flat. They're every which way but flat, you know. So that provides its own challenges. You know, our assets, as I mentioned, we started up our Brule mine in 2016. It's one of the PCI coal, and we chose to start that mine up first because it had the best opportunity to get started as quickly as possible and get things up. So, you know, we had the equipment there, we had the coal pretty well established there, so we started it up. And all of that coal is then trucked 60 kilometers to our Willow Creek loadout facility, where it's put on the CN rail. and then it's shipped to the Ridley terminal, and all of our coal so far has been going to Asia, in the Asian markets, so we had to reestablish the brand name, we had to reestablish the credibility across the board and get things moving. So last year we produced 2.4 million tons from Brule Mine, which is phenomenal, and we had 0 lost time accidents at Brule Mine. That helped propel our total company to having one of to being the safest mining operation in all of British Columbia. And for starting up from scratch, you know, we're pretty proud of that, but we're more proud of our employees for the efforts that they imposed on trying to, you know, to work safely and go home every night. As Jeremy said, the same thing for us. You know, we want everybody to go home at night. You know, we don't want people getting hurt and having to be carried out. We started up our Wolverine mine in about 4 or 5 months later in early 2017. And when we started it up, you know, the challenges we had there was you know, trying to find, you know, enough people. And even today, our biggest challenge is finding mechanics and electricians that are qualified and certified. It's just an ongoing challenge to get good people out there. So the trades business, you know, it's one of high demand, and there's very few people out there that are truly qualified to do the work. You know, we started up the Wolverine mine. The Wolverine mine is a hard coking coal product. So it's a higher quality coal than what's coming out of Brule. So we also have to wash that coal or process that coal once we mine it. Brule, we do not. We ship it direct from the mine. But with Wolverine, we do have to process that coal, and then we put it on the rail line there that's outside of Tumbler Ridge, and then rail it onto Ridley Terminal as well. We actually worked with CN last year to rehabilitate that rail line that they had to let go for a couple years, and it was in pretty sad shape. It required about $20 million in rehab work, of which we participated in that. Not happy about that, but we did. This summer, we're planning on opening up Willow Creek operation. It by far has the best quality coal, but it also has the most challenging geology. And therefore, the cost to operate that mine is a little bit higher. And, but the rewards of it is it's really a premium coal quality that's out there. And again, because it's at Willow Creek, you know, it'll share the same facilities that we have with our coal that's being trucked 60 kilometers a year to, or 60 kilometers to the Willow Creek operation. You know, we're expecting about 1.5 million tons, clean tons coming out of Willow Creek, and about 2 million tons, 2.3 million tons coming out of our Wolverine operation. So last year, with Wolverine and Brule combined, we were a little bit around 4 million tons of total production, and we had a really good year last year because the coal market prices really, once we opened up Brule, coal market prices doubled in about 3 months. So, you know, that really helped propel getting our equipment back up. The money we made, we put $70 million back into our equipment from the plus $100 million we made for the company. So, next slide, Dan. So how do we do it? You know, our mining process is really about a 5-stage process. We start with clear cutting and grubbing the land. And then we rake off the topsoil, and we either store it or we use it on ongoing reclamation work, you know, in areas that we've previously mined. So once we get the topsoil off, then we start drilling and shooting in the solid rock to where we can get to the coal. And we do that with a series of drills that range from around 10 inches in diameter drill holes to 12.5, 13-inch drill holes, and drilling about 16 meters at a time with roughly about you know, about an 8 meter by 8 meter pattern. Next slide. And we got a little video here of where we put off a shot. I thought you'd be interested in seeing that. If Ben can get it to work. There it goes. So what we're doing here in this particular shot is what we call a cast shot. We're familiar with that elsewhere in other mining areas, but up here I don't think it was used too much. But here, about 50% of the overburden is actually, the way we designed the blast itself, is cast into the old vacant pit. And then once we're done, we introduced another new concept up here that I've used elsewhere. It's called dozer pushing. And instead of deadlifting the material with a truck and shovel, we use dozers to push where we can, when we can, into old pits that had been previously mined. So that's a picture off to the right. It's really kind of an interesting technique. And that picture doesn't show it, but we have 5 dozers working side by side, pushing all day long into the old pit, and it works really well. Ben? After we get the coal uncovered, probably 90% of our total cost and total effort goes into the clear cutting and the grubbing and the topsoil and then the overburden removal. And then once we get to the coal seams, then we clean off the top of the coal seams, and then we start loading the coal seams. And we're fortunate that we have 5-meter thick seams of coal at the Brule mine and about 4-meter thick seams of coal at Wolverine. Willow Creek is a little more challenging. It's about 1.5 to 2 meters of thickness. But all of those are pretty good thickness coals. And we use excavators to put it onto haul trucks. And then we haul it up to a stockpile area there at the mine. Go ahead, Ben. And we do a couple things for the way we handle our coal. It's a little different from our predecessors. We actually did some time before we started up the mine to analyze the coal seams and realize that there's some bands of different qualities in that coal seam. And if you load it all out, you kind of get what you get. Where what we do is I call it split loading the seams. We will go in there and parse out certain zones in that seam at a time, and take like maybe the top layer and put it off into one pile that has one ash characteristic. Then we'll take the midsection out and then put it into a separate pile, and then the bottom portion of the seam, into a third pile. And off to the right, once we have those seams segregated in that way in those stockpiles, then we come back in and we'll crush it down to about a 6-inch size, and then we will blend in those different qualities and come up with the quality that our customers are looking for. And this is all done at the mine. And then once we do that, then we truck it to the Willow Creek and put it onto the rail cars and then ship it to the Port Ridley. Our business plan and company focus is obviously a strong safety focus there, evidenced by we had 1 lost time last year at the Wolverine mine, and 0 at the Brule mine, and 0 at our Willow Creek loadout operations. So we ended up with a 0.17 lost time accident frequency rate for the company. So we were very happy with that, but we knew it was because of our people. We also have a strong commitment on the environment. We did inherit, some sins of the past, and we've got to work through those and figure out how to overcome those. But at the same time, we're looking at innovative ways to handle some of the issues that are out there right now for us. Our game plan is to be a low-cost producer. Our predecessor, when they were here, they were in the 99th percentile for all metallurgical coal mines worldwide, which meant that 99% of all the other competitors had a lower cost. When we finished up last year, we were at 62%, in the 62 percentile range, and right now we're at the 50 percentile range on our costs. We keep working on ways to improve and become more efficient in all of our operations, and that comes from a lot of teamwork and a lot of input from our employees, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. We have a low debt, very low debt. In fact, last year we paid $30 million down, brought our principal down by $30 million, and essentially cut it in half. We're looking for the long term. Our owners of the company were privately held. The owners of the company allowed us and agreed to reinvest the lion's share of all the profits last year, 1 into the equipment and 2 into paying down the debt. So we have a long-term position, you know, both, like I said, Mark, myself, live in Tumbler and plan on staying there. We have over 200 million tons in our reserve base with the 65,000 hectares that we control. And we have, we're looking at a plus 15-year mine life for all of our operations as we go forward. We're also looking at, you know, how we can empower all of our partners in our venture as we continue to move forward. And our primary goal is we got to have a product that our customers will want and appreciate. And we're doing that with a consistent quality and a very high quality, and really in direct competition now with the Australian market. So that's our primary goal, and our real goal is to get down into the first quartile, which is around the 40% percentile as far as cost production goes. Then regardless of what the market does, and the market's pretty turbulent in the coal business, so, you know, regardless of what the market does with a low debt, you know, we can sustain through the tough times. So we, you know, we can tuck our feathers in and make do while that lasts. And then once the market comes back up, we're in a position to take off again. This chart down below shows, you know, our progression from September of 16 through 2020. Right now, we have about roughly around 625 employees working for us directly, and we've probably got about, probably another 300 or 400 contractors working directly for us, and then there's some indirectly as well. The bottom chart shows the progression on tonnage. Like I said, we had a little over 3.5 million tons last year that we sold. We produced 4. We ended up where CN Rail didn't pick up all of our coal, so they left some coal on the ground for us in December 31. So we couldn't, if we can't move it, we can't sell it. But this year, with the startup of Willow Creek, we're looking at bringing on an additional 270 employees, of which we've already hired about 50 of them already. Our plan is to start up at the end of this month with more employees coming on board. This chart here shows a little bit of our extended mine life for our Brule Complex, Wolverine, and Willow Creek, and then our ramping up of our annualized production starting in September of 16, and by the end of this year, we're going to be at around 5.5 million tons per year. And our goal is to get up a little bit over 7 million tons, and we think that's a pretty good run rate for us for an overall cost side. And that's where we're shooting for. The different colors represent the lifespan at each complex or each permit that we have. So, you know, we're currently right now with Wolverine. In fact, on Monday, I'll be down with the ministry talking about the light blue area there, which is our East Bull Moose complex, where we're actively putting a permit package together. And at last count, we were at 12,000 pages for a permit. Go figure. Nobody reads it. They just say, well, just give us the short and skinny of it. You know, it's like, well, why are we doing 12,000 pages? But anyway, so that's our kind of our overall scheme for the operations and for the mine life. And we've got the reserves, we got the equipment, and the market price is good. So, you know, we're in really good shape. Go ahead, Ben. You know, our overall business plan is to click. On loss prevention. We really don't have a safety department at our operations or in our company. We have a loss prevention group, and that loss prevention group focuses on what we can do to prevent any kind of losses, whether they be injury-based or losses due to accidents or damage or equipment failures. And so we look at, you know, we have we're the top-ranked safety mining company in BC, and probably in Canada, and maybe in the U.S. You know, but you know, we've been very impressed with everybody's performance and our abilities to operate, and people going home every night. You know, one other thing we do with our loss prevention group is what we call incident investigations, with a focus on root cause, not so much looking for blame as we are looking for what happened and what we can do to keep that from happening again. So we get a lot of input from our employees who are involved with these incident investigations, And that gives us, a real opportunity to get that feedback and understand, what we can do better. And during that time, we also get suggestions on performance, on operations improvements, and there's been a lot of good ideas that have come from many of our different employees. And we usually pick out like an idea or the best idea of the month and give everybody $100 or give those people $100 for giving us the best idea for that month, for each mine, for each operation. We look at, one of the pillars of our operations is our integrity process system. We start out with our mission statement of what we're about, and layer on the values that we put into the whole system, and then we start building our pillars. And in 2017, we did our pillar 1, which was a lot of on the loss prevention side, and putting together incident investigations and action plans, and getting feedback, and then following up on each and every one of those. We're now squarely into the pillar 2, and then this later on this year we'll start pillar 3. All that leading up to our overall security for everybody, for our employees, for the community, and our vendors and the owners. So the integrity process, we do that by management, by accountability. We hold all of our employees to be as though they were owners. Oh, am I late? Okay. So I got to speed up. I got to talk faster. Stuart talked too long. So the ownership is also a part of that as well. Go ahead, Ben. We're always looking to maximize our opportunities by looking at proactive ideas and action plans. This picture off to the right is one of our passive water treatment facilities to handle selenium as well as sulfates and nitrates that are present in some of the water that's coming off the mining operation. Some of the other competitors are using an active system where it's perpetual treatment and using chemicals. This doesn't use any of that. It basically uses bugs that like to eat selenium, and it's working very well. So we completed that late in the third quarter and right in time for the winter. So bugs don't work too well in the winter, but they did work, just kind of like in second gear instead of in sixth. Our signature operations group picture of our employees in front of one of our overburden shovels gives you an idea of the size and the perspective. And then, we look at a series of different things that we're looking at. We talked about that passive system, which is called a biochemical reactor. And we look at proactive engineering and environmental opportunities, our quality control system, our dozer cached, high wall miners. WEBS is a wireless electronic blasting system that has not ever been used at a surface mine anywhere in the world. And we're working with Orica to get that approved through the ministry and then try that at our operations. And that should be starting in May, or at the end of May. The solid bowl screen is something there where we're picking up about 10 clean tons per hour coming out of our preparation plant at the Wolverine mine operation. And the Project Excel is something that's really neat. All of our employees, when they start to shift, get an iPad, and that iPad allows them to do their pre-shift inspections online, and then any kind of issues with the equipment gets reported directly to the maintenance department real time, as opposed to filling out a piece of paper or telling the supervisor, and maybe it gets reported or maybe somebody looks at it. So, and then we develop a big long list of items that needs to be taken care of, and then we follow up to make sure those things are tracked and done. And then, we're now looking at training all of our employees. So, our last signature item is what we call pay it forward. And, we look at our employee families. We have a number of outings and events for all of our employees. But the biggest thing there is each employee is eligible for an efficiency share bonus at the end of each month. It's primarily based on safety performance for the entire mine, plus, if we've met certain production and goals and objectives. And last year we averaged $700 per month per employee. Our community, we're always engaged with our First Nations partners. We have a number of contractors working out there who are First Nations based and are doing an excellent job for us and a phenomenal job in a couple places, really well. We're also involved with our local communities with a number of different projects and events going on all the time. And then, our extended partners, which would be up here at Fort St. John and over at Dawson Creek as well. And then our overall partners, which I'll characterize more on our services side, our vendors. Last year we had a vendor appreciation meeting or dinner down in Vancouver, and we had 125 vendors that we deal with on an ongoing basis. And then obviously, we're working with various community support groups and various environmental groups as well. But, our plans is to keep expanding that as we move forward. And we've had a lot on our plate as we're starting up operations and mines. Ben, one of the things we like to do, what we really did was we spent a good deal of time when we came in here was study what happened in the past. And then we looked at, how are we going to earn people's respect and gain their trust? And then, we're looking at, obviously we want to make sure we have an impact, a positive impact. Obviously any mining operation does have some real negative impacts in that area, but that's only temporary, and we're looking at ways we can improve everything we do to minimize that impact as we go forward. We're looking at proactive ideas and creative approaches that BCR is one. It's a passive treatment, so it doesn't need maintenance. Once it's in place and up and running, it'll run forever. The profit sharing, we talked about, a little bit on that side. We're looking at a little different approach with how we do things, more based on profit sharing rather than revenue sharing. And, we obviously have, responsibility to all of our communities, of which we live and are a part of, and we want to make sure that we have that right support, to those communities in the right ways. And then finally, we are sensitive to the issues and relationships as we go forward, and we're trying to figure out how to make the best path forward as we continue to develop and grow as a company. And obviously, the best way to do that, to earn respect, is to be open with your communications, and that's our goal, and that's what we're striving for. And ultimately, we're looking for a stronger tomorrow. So, the results, are uncompromised safety results. Like I said, best in British Columbia. We have, by the end of this year, we'll have 850 employees, and plus an additional probably 4,000 employees with various contract relationships, from truckers to, those in the service-related businesses that are also part of our overall organization. This year we'll be at $120 million in compensation, $40 million to the First Nations communities and the federal government. We're looking at adding $100 million this year for investments that we've already got approved in the budget, and we're ready to go with it, and we're actually implementing that now when we're starting up Willow Creek. Our transportation costs last year was $275 million, and our overall service and supply, parts, engines, differentials, all that, and labor to put all that together was $385 million. So, we feel like we've been blessed. When we started up the company, the market price was $90 a ton. By the end of that quarter, it had doubled to $180 a ton. And that was such a great blessing for all of us to be able to then take the lion's share of that profit and put it back into the company, which that equipment had been parked for 2 to 3 years, and it all needed some TLC. So that's what we did. And that's who we are, Kanuma. Thank you very much.
So everyone, your patience. This is the first night we've done something like this. We tried to pack in so many wonderful speakers. Ken, that's an amazing story. We're hearing great stories from a lot of industry in the area. What I'd like to do right now is give everyone a moment just to use the washroom. We'll take a 4-minute, 5-minute break. That's it. And we'll come back and finish our last speakers. Well, I do know this, the chefs in the kitchen, They have an amazing food prepped to match with these wines, and we will get to that very, very soon. So please be patient and just take about a 4-minute stand-up break to stretch your legs. Get some water over here. There's still some sliders back there, I believe, and the washrooms are outside. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Those are 5 minutes, if you hope you don't mind having a seat. Thank you. Well, welcome back, everyone. I'm going to get ourselves going again so we can get to our last two speakers, which are, I think they'll be quite engaged in the information they have to share. So I'd like to bring to the podium the newly appointed president of Surerus Murphy Joint Venture, Mr. Sean Surerus.
Thanks, Nelson. I know that I don't have the best position here tonight, coming right after the break that we needed, I think. And I'm glad to see that all the bottles of wine aren't on the table yet, because it'd be pretty distracting. You know, I haven't seen so many empty glasses in Fort St. John ever. You know, thanks for the introduction, Nelson. And you know, I do get to speak quite a bit to our construction teams, and that's on our projects. And every year, you know, month after month, we talk to, you know, thousands of people on our projects. And we have a message. It's a message about safety and communication and planning. And here it's a bit different. And you know, the other difference is they're paid to listen to me. So here we are. You guys paid to come here, not for me, but for the others. And we've got a great group here. And it's great that we've learned so much about what else is going on. I'm in the pipeline sector, and that's what we're focused on. But to know a little bit more about what's going on around the Peace region with the other industries that are important to our economy is well received. When we had the opportunity to join up for the event, we didn't hesitate. You know, we're a local business, and we've been here for nearly 50 years. My dad founded the company in 1969. And, you know, it started from very little, a dump truck, a pickup truck that was traded in for a dump truck. And here we are, one of the larger businesses in our community. But not only that, we're one of the largest pipeline contractors in the country, and we're based right here in Fort St. John. You know, regularly we employ over 1,000 people on our projects. We work in the 4 western provinces, and we do some interesting work throughout those communities. But we're active here in Fort St. John. We support the arts, sport. We're membered. We shaved our heads last year for the Bluey Days, and there's countless other volunteer and corporate giving opportunities that we participate in. So what we're about here tonight is we're learning, but we also want to talk a bit about the community and how the community supports us. So we've been a big member of the region, and some of those key benefits of being from this area is really the support we do get. We talked a bit about the Resource Municipalities Coalition earlier, and the responsible resource development in our region. And you know, I think we've got to thank our leaders for the efforts they put in to demonstrate the support for our businesses and for our resource sector. You know, without that willingness to participate and to engage and to have that dialogue, we wouldn't get the support that we need in the north. And this community-based support is needed, and as we're seeing an ever increasing, and we're also seeing, you know, we're getting that support, we're seeing more and more leaders from these communities speak up. And I think that's evidenced with Trans Mountain. So we're a business that's been invested in our community for 49 years. We've survived the tough times, business cycles that were challenging, high interest rates, out of touch governments, tough projects, and untold other obstacles that a business owner would experience. And we're operating in an uncertain time for our projects. We're one of the selected contractors for Trans Mountain, as is Macro SPE here in Fort St. John. 27% of that pipeline from Northeast BC contractors. People don't know that in BC. And right now we're having to make some tough decisions on people as we await clarity on that project. We joined a joint venture with J. Murphy and Son from the UK to pursue these large projects like Trans Mountain, like Energy East, like Keystone. There were nearly 30 projects 4 years ago. Now we're down to less than a handful. One of those we're part of, one of those that stalled. The world was coming to BC for the LNG boom, and that's slowly slipped away. So that's where we are today. One of the things that we're focusing on, though, is speaking up. And I can tell you that I've been connected with many more media outlets than I could imagine in the last month. And that's because we're more willing to speak up more than ever. And we need to do that. And that's where we are today with this event, and hopefully others like that throughout the province. So my commitment to you is that I'll speak up and I'll defend. But the ask is that when you get that opportunity, you do as well. That's my thoughts, and I'd just like to share my introduction for Susanna Pierce. So Susanna's joined us as External Relations Director for LNG Canada. LNG Canada is a joint venture of Shell, Mitsubishi, PetroChina, and KOGAS. And in this role, Susanna has been responsible for the environment, regulatory, First Nations, community consultation, social performance, communications, and government relations aspect of the project. Prior to this position, Susanna served as Vice President, Value Chain Integration at Shell Canada. In this capacity, she was responsible for identifying and driving commercial opportunities along the value chain between Shell's multiple businesses in Canada. Susanna has held the position of Vice President, Upstream International Communications based in The Hague, where she oversaw a communications government relations team of approximately 200 professionals in Asia, Australia, the Middle East, Africa, Russia, and Europe. Susanna was previously head of government relations for Shell Canada and director of government affairs for TransCanada Pipelines while being based in Washington, D.C. and New York City. Susanna currently lives in Vancouver and has 2 children, Robert and Gabriella. Please welcome Susanna to this evening's resource rally.
Okay. Well, I'm going to put it quite simply. I was born in Regina, Saskatchewan. Okay, that's all you need to know. I was raised in Calgary, and now I'm in BC. The rest you can forget about. Okay. And the other one point I'll make is, I am actually a pipeliner's daughter. Okay. You're the coal miner's daughter. I am the pipeliner's daughter. I grew up in Calgary, and as a kid growing up, I knew all about the energy sector. I heard all about the pipeline travails from the Alberta natural gas trunk line system, from the Alaska natural gas trunk line system to the Mackenzie Delta pipeline. I know all about that stuff. And in fact, I went down to Washington, D.C. That's when I got my undergraduate degree. And that was at the same time we were trying to get those pipelines built. And so as a kid growing up, it's quite interesting. I grew up under the travails of how do we get gas all the way up in Alaska down to the lower 48? Or how do we get gas from the northern parts of Canada down into the rest of Canada, the Mackenzie Delta pipeline? I grew up with the song and dance and the sorrow of all of that. And I actually tried to get away from it. I did. I went down to Washington, D.C. I was on a scholarship, and I thought, I don't want to do anything to do with the energy sector. Don't ever let me hear about it again. But somehow you get roped back into it. Part of it is where you come from. And you can never forget where you come from. And so even as a kid who was in Washington, D.C., trying to learn about Capitol Hill, knowing all the bad stuff that goes on and the good stuff, mostly bad stuff, but knowing about how it all works. And I realized eventually that I needed to come back. And it was actually TransCanada that brought me back. And so I started the job at TransCanada, and they put me back down into Washington, D.C., where I started to do some work for them in trying to get stuff built. And actually one of the first projects I worked on for them was the Keystone Project. It wasn't the first, but it was one of the ones that was very successful, actually, quite frankly. We got it actually permitted in less than 2 years. Who would have thought? An oil pipeline, we got permitted in less than 2 years. And to be honest, I mean, it was a big oil pipeline, and it was a big deal. But times have changed. And so what I'm here to do today, and I could never say no when Lori asks, is tell you about where we are in LNG. And why I'm so committed to it is in part because of where I come from. But it's also because we need it. We must have it. And the story I'll tell you about tonight, I feel in my blood and my bones, which is why I will go anywhere, just like Stuart, to tell anybody who asks me to talk about it. Because I believe Canada needs it, I believe British Columbia needs it, and I will fight until we get it. And I want to prove everybody who says we can't get it done wrong. And I want to do what my dad was not able to do. And that is to get our gas to new exports, to new export markets. I want to actually be able to do that. So let's get started, and let's talk about what is the case for LNG Canada. Now, I know that there's drinks and food coming, so I'm going to go through this pretty quick because you probably already know this, but the next graphic kind of tells us a pretty sad story, because this picture you see here is that export market we were depending upon. It was actually the Foothills pipeline, which now is owned by TransCanada, that got our first gas molecules to the U.S. That's going away. It's going away because the United States, as you know, has the same opportunity for shale gas that we do, and they're using it. They don't need us anymore. And in fact, what you see over here on the right, that's a picture of US gas actually coming into Canada. What is going on? The world has changed. Our number one customer doesn't need us anymore. We need to find new customers, and we know that. If you go to the next slide, just another great picture I stole from Peyto Petroleum, and this is a great graph showing the same thing, is that US natural gas supply and demand is going up pretty quickly, whereas ours is actually going down. The other thing is the value of the gas that we export now, the price is going down, so we get less for what we actually deliver. So this is not a good winning situation for us. We keep going. But look at this picture. Now, you don't actually have to understand graphs to see what the big bubbles mean, really. What it tells you is that there's a hell of a lot of energy that people are needing in the rest of the world. Okay, when we really think about how much energy is growing between now and 2040, it's the equivalent of adding another China and India. I'm going to say it like Donald Trump, China and India. But it really is a lot. It's huge. It's really huge. But our problem is we are not having the opportunity to supply it. This is the crazy notion that's in my head, is we have so much wonderful natural gas, and yet we are not able to reach that market. Same thing with our oil. I'm going to talk to you today about gas. So this, for me, is a picture that says a lot. Now, you can keep going. This is a picture which I think you're somewhat familiar with, because you'll see some of the communities there that you're very close to. And when you really think about how long it takes for us to actually get all of the gas that we produce up here all the way down into Kitimat, where the LNG Canada project is, it's about 1.5 days. And then from there, it'll take about 10 days after we liquefy it, which takes about a day, and onto a ship, it'll take about 10 days to get to those markets in Asia. And the cool thing about this is about 2 days faster than it would be if it came out to US Gulf Coast. That's an advantage that we have here in Canada, in addition to the fact that, for better or worse, we have pretty cheap gas. You know, it's actually too cheap right now, I understand that, and we want to bring it up a bit. That's what exports will do. Fundamentally, they will get this gas that we have here to the fastest growing economies in the world. Those big bubbles, just remember that. That's our target. That's where we need to get to. Let me go to the next slide. The market to import liquefied natural gas has grown 260 million tons per year in 38 countries, and that is because people recognize that we need more energy. But increasingly, if we like it or not, they also recognize we need energy that's less carbon intensive. Because whether or not you're a climate change believer or a doubter, the fact of the matter is you can actually have a choice of energy that is actually lower in carbon. So if it can compete, if it can be economical, if you have access to it, and it's a robust source of energy like natural gas, in other words, the energy content in it is robust, why not? Why not do something which is lower in carbon, but also provides significant energy supply? So when you look at all these countries all over the world, what they're recognizing is we need energy. Natural gas is a great source of that. In fact, it's a powerful source for power generation, and increasingly you're seeing it in transportation. So all of these different places are looking to bring in liquefied natural gas, and in part because you can't always depend on pipelines. They don't have pipelines that can connect to resource bases, and you can basically very economically put LNG onto a ship and ship it directly into these countries. If you go into the next slide. So Canada can meet the growing demand in Asia, largely, which is where the fastest energy demand is, with natural gas while reducing carbon emissions. And again, if you can do it by reducing carbon emissions, why not? What's great about Canada? It's cold. But like it or not, I know it's spring now, we're feeling the warmth. I like it too. But the lower climate, the lower temperature, actually, when you're liquefying natural gas, which is taking it from current temperature, like we feel in the room, down to minus 162 degrees Celsius, better to do it in a colder climate than in a hotter climate. It's just more efficient. It's easier to do it. We are 10 days from here to ports in Asia. Like I said, it's a 2-day advantage from US Gulf Coast. We have abundant supply. Do I need to tell you guys that? You know how much energy supply we have. You know that we are waiting to produce this gas to bring it to those hungry countries that need it for their own energy. It complements renewables. What does that really mean? We all know wind doesn't blow all the time. We know sun doesn't shine all the time. And until Elon Musk stops having fits and builds a bigger battery, we're going to have to make sure that we have a supply of energy, a power supply of energy that's not intermittent. It's stable, so that when wind stops blowing, you can still turn your lights on. And that's what we need gas for. It builds trade ties. Again, we talked a little bit about the opportunity to access new markets that we haven't for our energy, and gas is an opportunity for us to do that. And obviously, as I've said before, lower CO2, carbon dioxide, but the air piece here is also significant. Who's ever been to Beijing or China? Who's ever been outside and you can't really see ahead of you or breathe, and they tell you you gotta wear a mask? That's significant. How many premature deaths in the millions die each year because of poor air quality? Okay? So it's real. Why wouldn't we not have an opportunity to supply a cleaner resource to them so that they can actually clean up the air? It's good for everybody. What are we trying to do here? We're trying to build the largest energy investment project ever in Canadian history. Just a small task, really. It's a big task. And when you build this entire project out, the LNG Canada project, it will be built with 4 trains of liquid, 4 LNG trains. Essentially what a train does is it takes the gas, which is at the current temperature, and it liquefies it, like I said, down to minus 162 degrees Celsius. And 4 trains will be the equivalent of pretty much all the gas you're producing right now in BC. We take it all and we export it. It's about 4 billion cubic feet a day that you're producing right now in British Columbia. At full build out, this thing would take that gas over to Asia. Gives you the opportunity to replace it. But the other key thing is, remember that first chart I showed you? It also allows you to actually, all that gas is being reabsorbed back into this province. You actually have a place to put it because you've lost that other market to the south. You found a new market for it. That will also help you raise the price a bit. So we consider ourselves to be the project of choice of British Columbia, and all these signs that you see here are the symbols of each of the companies that are wanting to be investors in this project. So Shell, which is the company that I'm seconded from. You have PetroChina, you have Korea Gas, and Mitsubishi Corporation. And why are they partners here? Because these are the companies that recognize they need the gas for their own countries and for countries that they market this gas to, they'll sell this gas to. These are the powerhouses of the natural gas and LNG industry, and they would like to invest a significant amount of money in this province, significant, to make it the largest single energy investment in Canadian history. Next slide. But we are in Canada, as I think we well know, we are competing for that capital. And like I said, the great thing about Canada is we have a hell of a lot of natural gas. Our challenge is, it is far from the coast. Get from here to the coast, when we talk about that Coastal GasLink pipeline, TransCanada's here in the room, it's about 670 kilometers. You know, it does take about 1.5 days for a molecule to travel, but that's still a long way. And for a pipeline that hasn't been built, that's quite a bit of money. And when you look at the rest of the world, like US Gulf Coast, they've already got those pipelines in place. They've got import facilities that now they're flipping the switch on and now exporting the gas. We need a lot of capital, right? We need to put a lot of money in to build the infrastructure, and that is a competitive disadvantage for us. But that is why we've been working so hard in this company to try and bring all the pieces together. What are some of those pieces? Well, part of those pieces, actually, quite frankly, you'd be surprised, but working with the current government. What you heard the Premier do in March was actually very significant if you missed it. Because what he did is he recognized that something's not working, whereas if in the United States, they've already had 5 or 6 FIDs, and projects are being built, but in the same amount of time, we've had none. What's wrong? We've got great gas, we're 2 days shorter sailing to Asia. What's the problem? Part of the problem was competitiveness. When you look around the world, we need a lot of capital, like I said, to invest. How can we compete with other places where they don't require the same amount of capital? What does the tax and fiscal system look like? How can we actually find a way of maybe actually making one of these projects happen? And so when he came out with the fiscal framework in March, that was a significant step forward. So in as much as there's many things that some may not like about this premium, they actually did something relatively good, in fact, fantastic, as it relates to seeing whether or not we can make LNG happen, because LNG will be a game changer for this community and all the communities along the pipeline. And so we have a real shot at it because of those actions, and that helps. The other thing that we in this company have to do is be cost competitive. So when we look at all the contractors that we need to work with, when we look at what we pay for ourselves, we need to say, are we competing with the rest of the world? Because all of that money that could go anywhere, we want to bring it here. Because when we do bring it here, it will be the single largest energy investment in Canadian history. We will employ, and I think when you consider along the pipeline as well as the plant, about 10,000 trade jobs, about 950 when we're in operations. It is a significant investment, significant opportunity, and that's just direct employment. I'm not talking about the indirects. So it's a huge opportunity here. We've just got to be cost competitive, and we're almost there. I think we're almost there. I'm not going to say we're taking FID, because somebody asked me that. I'm not going to say that. But I think everybody that's been working day and night and very hard for the last 7 years believes that we're as close as we've ever been. But we are not yet there. So we need to keep working hard at it. Let me go to the next slide. The great thing about where we are in this province is in Kitimat, which is not to say Fort St. John isn't fantastic too. It is. In fact, we probably wouldn't be as far along as we are on this project without the mayor here. She's my hero in many, many ways. But it's her willingness, and I think it's all of your willingness to stand up and say, this matters. Hashtag the North matters. The resource community matters. Canada was founded on resources. Let's not forget that. But let's also paint a picture of how we develop resources in such a way that makes people believe there's a future here, which is also consistent with a better life. Why the environmentalists will win is because they paint the picture that life is better without resources. Well, we need to demonstrate that life is, in fact, better with. So let's continue to make sure that message is heard. And there are people in this room that stand up every day and do that. We need to continue to do that. I'm 100% behind it. Out of your seats and onto the streets. That's how it works. And it's not the technical stuff that we could spend a lot of time talking about and boring you before we have a great glass of wine and dinner. But it's about your passion. It's about your life. It's about your family. It's about your jobs. It's about your kids. That's what this is about. And that's where we win. That's what natural resources should be about. So when we tell those personal stories, it's a game changer. So now I want to show you a video that'll tell you one of those.
We've lived through the unfortunate time of an industry's closing in our community. People and families leaving our community. Having a project like this move forward, it gives the families that want to stay here that opportunity.
That's the beautiful town of Kitimat, for those who haven't seen the aerial before.
Opportunity for my children to move home for jobs, bring their grandchildren home. We want to see our town flourish and grow back to what it was and what it can be.
It'll make such a huge difference. We're such a small town. It'll put us on the map. It'll help us become a bigger community and welcome a lot more people.
We want LNG Canada, and they want to be wanted here as well, so it works. It just works. They make you feel like you matter. They make you feel like your voice is heard. What you have to say is important, and to me, that's a big thing.
LNG opens a whole new chapter in our province's history of being world-class providers of natural resources.
It's an opportunity for us to bring online an incredible export industry where we can show the world how to do it better than anyone else.
This project is a catalyst for us to really become global players to meet market demand, both in the energy space, but in evolving a world in a low-carbon environment. Our organization and the 260 members in the province of British Columbia and First Nations are supportive of moving forward with this project.
Working with LNG Canada has been amazing. They've been very professional with us. They've treated us with the utmost respect. This is the first time you've ever seen First Nations work in partnership with industry to this magnitude. This project will be a game changer.
The impacts are completely immeasurable. Employment opportunities, social benefits in terms of mental health, addictions, right down to housing. It's what every First Nation can dream of.
Well, good morning, everyone. I would like to begin by inviting each and every one of you that is in support of LNG to join us up here on the stage. Don't be shy.
One of the calls to action was to get letters of support from the community. That would be a huge thing in helping this project go forward. So we got together, drafted a letter up, and collected signatures. Then word got out kind of all over BC and to all the different communities. There's a lot at stake here. If they're saying that they're listening to us, then they'll get this project going because everybody here is asking for it.
The timing couldn't be any better than it is now. We still have that enthusiasm that we want it. The longer we wait, the longer it gets put off, the longer it gets delayed, that enthusiasm starts wearing thin.
This is a good working relationship that shows where government, industry, and the First Nations come together and make something meaningful happen.
They're very credible. I think that they have created this environment of trust, which is why they have so much support in our community. We've had some movements around town. We want LNG Canada. We've had placards in people's yards. That's someone who we want to do business with.
I've never worked with a corporate entity that pays such particular attention to its workforce development strategies.
We're ready, and we will be ready with the skilled trades and the apprentices to get the project built and keep it operating for many years to come.
We'll do what we can to remove the remaining roadblocks, be they in Ottawa or be they in Victoria. We definitely want this project to go ahead in the community. The community stands behind the development. We want LNG Canada to become a reality.
Not only is Kitimat a good place to invest in LNG, it is the perfect place to invest in a major LNG project.
The time is now.
All right, time is now. Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to come speak to you tonight, and it's great to always come to Fort St. John. So thank you again to all the sponsors, and I believe now I get to hand it off because we're going to have some fun with some drinks and some great food. Well, we've all been waiting for it.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it, Suzanne. I just asked basically to say thank you all the sponsors. We're going to do a draw right away, and then we're going to basically hand this whole thing over to the chefs, and they're going to start to explain the wines and the pairings and get us some food. So I'd like to also thank our musicians, Dana and Skylar. Thank you very much. And all the sponsors. We do have a program. We have a program there with all the sponsors listed in there, and we just to save time, please read through it. Please appreciate those sponsors, and thank you so much for your support. So this one? Okay, here you go. Who's it? Okay. 18. Ticket 18. And we have, I think we have 4 total. That's 1? 3 total. So that's 1, and we have 2 more. So we're going to